here today with Buddy Jacobs to learn about the restoration of the Rawlings house in the 1960s. I had, of course, known about Rawlings. I was given a copy of the Yearling when I was much too young. I was a Tennessean, as Claude Jarman was. And I also knew about the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings house very early in the 1950s because I had a good friend who was at Vanderbilt who later came to the University of Florida and lived in the Rawlings house along with his wife and two children. Jesse had come to the University of Florida to get a master's under Andrew Lytle, and Marjorie, of course, had died in 1953 and left her house and basically her properties to the University of Florida Foundation. In her will, there was precatory language expressing a preference that the house be used to house graduate students in English literature. And indeed, the first few years after she died, it was. And my friend Jesse and his wife and children actually lived in the house in 1954 and told me about their experiences there. So when I came to Florida to teach in 1962, I was very anxious to see the Rawlings house, but of course it was not open to the public. And then one day, Buddy Jacobs invited me and Dean Farley and his wife to go and see the house and to have lunch. I think it was at May and Nell's Fish Camp. Well, this was my introduction to the physical house. And so, Buddy, we want to talk to you today about how you restored the house, why you were interested, anything that you can tell us about that process.
All right. Well, Roy, good to see you. And of course, at my age, it's just good to be seen. But, you don't need to have this known about you because it's not necessarily good for you. But you're the reason I got through law school. You were my advisor, and you told me what to do, what not to do, and somehow I got through everything and graduated from there. I, at that time, became president of the student body while I was in law school. And then my senior year in law school, I became director of development for the University of Florida. And then when the then dean retired, Steve O'Connell, the president, made me the dean of University Relations and Development for the University of Florida. Well, I was the youngest dean ever. Today, Roy, I'm known as the oldest guy ever. So it was wonderful to work with that, and I really was very involved and really enjoyed historic preservation, and I've been involved in that all my life now, and a lot of different projects. But the one thing about the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings house is I was very interested in that because she gave us 72 acres, Orange Grove, and this wonderful house. Well, the house was old. The house, when she bought the property in 1928, the house was already there. She called it a farmhouse. And that's where she lived all the years that she was there. So I went down to see it, and it was in bad shape. It needed a lot of help. A lot of things needed to be fixed in it. And one of the first things I did was I had keys. So I went in the front door, and went in the front door. There's a closet there right by the front door that was locked hard, and I had trouble getting in it. And it had a kind of a bar thing sticking out on the lower door. And so I opened the upper door, went to open the upper door, and it hadn't been opened in a long, long time. So whoever stayed there maybe never opened it, I don't know. But all these liquor bottles came out of it and crashed all around me. So I figured somebody had been drinking some liquor there. And learning about Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, she drank a lot of liquor. So anyway, that was my first visit there. Then I went back and started making some plans. And so first thing, the furniture in there was in terrible shape. So I got the furniture out of a good friend of mine, Dennis Murphy, who was a tackle. He was from Valdosta, Georgia, tackle for the Gators varsity. He and I got a rental truck. He and I went out there, and on a Monday, we put all the furniture in this great big rental truck and took it to Rayford Prison. And I'd worked out a deal with the head of Rayford Prison that if I brought this furniture, would he get his woodworking crowd to redo it for me? And he agreed. So when I went there, I took the furniture, Dennis and I took the furniture, and he let us bring it to the prisoners, and they worked on it for about 6 months. And I would go up there periodically to check on what they were doing, and I brought the Yearling, I brought Cross Creek, and talked to them about those books and left them a couple of copies. And so I kind of lectured about Margekin and Rollins. And so they finished the furniture after about 6 months. So I also went to Sears and Roebuck in Gainesville and said I need some paint because I want to restore Margekin and Rollins' house. They said, fine, no problem. So they gave me all the paint I needed to go down there and paint the inside and part of the outside of the house. And I did that on my own. And then I went to J.C. Penney's. I said, I need some curtains. And so J.C. Penney's gave me these periodic curtains of that era. And so they were really very nicely fitting in that house. And so I got that done, got it all done, got it painted, and brought the furniture back to...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
How about the roof? How did you get the new roof on?
We did not put the new roof on at that time.
Okay.
Did not do that. That was done later whenever the state took it over.
Okay.
They did the new roof. But anyway, we got it all done, and we had a reception for the opening of the house and the property. And it's adjacent to, as you know, it's adjacent to a county park there. And when we had this plan, the chairman of the county commission was a friend of mine, and he wanted to have an official event. So we wanted to have the park dedicated and then Margekin and Ross dedicated at the same time. So we arranged it. I got a bunch of sugar cookies and a bunch of lemonade, and I got enough for about, several hundred people, and we planned this event. Well, also, I got the Rayford String Band to come. And so the Rayford String Band's coming down, and I wanted those 4 guys who helped me do all the furniture, I wanted them to come, and I got the prison to agree to let them come. What's interesting about that is we had 7 members of the Rayford Prison Band, 7 members, guitar guys, and they came on a bus and brought our 4 guys with us, and they had a bus driver from the prison who drove the bus. He was a guard. He didn't bring a gun. There were no guns down there, and because each prisoner knew if they were to in any way escape or cause any trouble, everybody would lose their rights to ever get out of the prison. So what they would do, they guarded each other. And so they didn't need a guard with a gun, because if someone went errant, the others would just go after him. So they all arrived. We had them, and what I trained those 4 guys to do was give a tour of the Margekin and Rollins house, and talk to them about the fact that the kitchen is away. It's not adjoined into the house. They have little ports that brings them together. But the reason for that is if the fire ever started in the kitchen, which is the only place the fire would be, that it would burn the whole house down. So you always had kitchens out there. And so they gave the tour. They talked about Margekin and Rollins books. They talked about the Cross Creek book. They talked about the Yearling book. And they did that in a tour. Well, there were a lot of people showed up. Over 200 people showed up. And it was a wonderful afternoon, and I didn't understand why there were so many people there. And it turns out that many of them were relatives of the band and relatives of the 4 guards that were there as because of the work they'd done to help me get it restored. So anyway, Anyway, so we had over 200 people there. An interesting thing to note about that is one of the people that came that was a very diminutive, slight-built individual, and I watched him, and he's out there, and he had been talking to a squirrel out in the backyard, and he got the squirrel to come up and get in his hand, a wild squirrel. He's sitting there talking to the squirrel in his hand, and I said, because I didn't know what the prisoners had done, and I said, what was his crime? And he said, oh, he was found guilty of killing 2 people. And I said, well, how'd that happen? He said, well, his wife was having an affair with a neighbor, and he came home from working on a farm early, and she was over there doing whatever with him, and he went in there with a gun and killed them both. So he got life imprisonment for killing those 2 people. But here he was out there talking to a squirrel, a wild squirrel in his hand. So he was quite a interesting fellow, anyway, to say the least. So that's kind of how all that got done over those years. Now we I was concerned about what's going to happen to it, how we're going to maintain it. And so I put together a fundraiser, and I had Bob Carson, who was looking for a place to live, and I let him live out there after we restored it. He and his wife lived out there, and he was very, loved it dearly, and he did some great artist renderings of it, and I have the originals of those. He gave them to me, and they were also in a book. He put them in a
Frontier Eden.
Frontier Eden, yeah. He was in that book. Frontier Eden was all about the activities of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlins and what was going on down there. So anyway, we took those, and I had them made into prints, a lot of prints, and I gave them out to, there were 2 of them together. One was a total front view, and one was a side view. And I gave them to people. They gave me $5,000. And so we put them in a package, and we talked to a lot of people and got a lot of people to give us $5,000. And I took that money and put it in the Florida Trust for the preservation of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlins house. So that's how we got all that done.
Well, how did you get Bob Carson to, because when I came, Bob was, I would say, the most loved faculty member at the University of Florida. He played the violin, and students would ask him to play at their weddings. So how did you get Bob to agree to do that?
I met him, and we were talking about the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlins house. He was very interested in historic preservation and very interested in restoring her house. And so he said, well, what if I stayed there a little while? And I said, sure. And so when he stayed there, he said, well, I'm going to do some artwork. So he did some artwork, and that was given to that fellow from the university who wrote Frontier Eden, but he gave me the originals, and I used those to restore and to use the money. Mm-hmm. And we kept it, and I wasn't a dean very long. I was there about a couple of years. I was in charge of other projects there, and because at the time I became the dean, they didn't have a universal place to give all the money that you raised from the university. Yeah. It all went to different colleges and things. Yeah. And I got them to do an umbrella program to go to the historic, not just historic preservation, but the whole university trust we have now, all these years. And so that's how I got that started.
Do you have any idea why the university stopped letting students live in it? Again, the language was precatory, which meant that it was not binding. It was simply her preference or wishes. And so again, my friends lived there in '54. Then I think there were a group of male graduate students living there. And I've never been able to determine why it stopped. And it was in falling apart when you came along.
Well, I've heard several stories. One of that the students were out there doing drugs, and and the police would come out there, and local police from and that area would come out there. And so the university just stopped it and wouldn't let anybody stay out there. And they closed the doors, and they didn't do anything about keeping the building up. And so when I got there, it was in really not good shape. Now, and not only did the painting and the curtains, but I had to get plumbers in there because the toilets weren't working, things like that. So it was quite a lot of reasons for them not to, but the university was not maintaining it at all. And so the foundation, I call it the trust, but it's the University of Florida Foundation.
Yeah.
When I became the dean, we were able to, the foundation was able to do that. And the foundation really just started growing big, great big. And I know the first year I was a dean, when I started getting the umbrella thing, I had, for the gift giving, I'd go around to different colleges and say, well, give me your projects. And I got 15, and I went to New York, walked down Park Avenue, and I raised about, I don't know, $16, $17 million then. And now they do many hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but I only had 4 employees in 67, 8, and 69. So, but now they have some wonderful people. I work with them all the time, and they do a great job for the university. But the foundation.
You had left and gone into practice, I guess,
Yeah.
by the time the university determined to transfer the property to the state
That's correct.
for the park to be a state historical park.
That's correct.
And have you had an opportunity to revisit it or visit to see the results of what you did?
Well, I have several times, and you and I went there, 15 years ago when I got married.
Yes, that's true.
And we had
I remember that day.
We had our wedding at that museum that when I was a dean, we built that
University
museum.
Gallery.
University Gallery built that. I helped raise the money to do that, and you helped me get the wedding there 15 years ago as of February the 4th. And I'm still married to this wonderful person, Lorelei. And the good news is her vision has not improved. And so she's still married to me. But I was driving through there. I was telling Donna I was driving through there from a seminar I had to conduct in Ocala for 60 lawyers down there. And I came by, and it's 4 miles off the road, off 301 into there. And it looks fantastic. They're doing a great job down there. Really
They are.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Well, fortunately, we have 2 organizations supporting it, the official citizen support organization, the Friends of the MKR Farm, and the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society. So it does look good. But
Well, and certainly deserving. Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings is one of the most extraordinary authors in America. I served on the National Council of the Arts under Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, and I've dealt with a lot of authors across the nation over all these years. And I got to tell you, she is so extraordinarily outstanding, and her thoughts about preserving Florida, her thoughts about trying to not let all the growth destroy Florida, were just phenomenal back in that era, back in the 40s and the 50s. And her writings were extraordinary.
And her friendships were amazing.
Oh, really were amazing. I know I studied her pretty, Norton Baskin, her husband, I studied him a lot too. And what a nice man, very nice fella. And he told me some things about her that, at least I heard some things about her that were through him, that she might have dressed plainly, but she wore beautiful lingerie from Paris, France. That's what I heard he had to say. I also dealt with her lawyer, Sigsbee Scruggs from Gainesville, Florida. And Phil May was her lawyer through the whole process. And she had to go through the state Supreme Court on that terrible case about Cross Creek. So
it was a very traumatic experience for her.
Really was.
And I don't think she ever felt the same way about living at Cross Creek again.
She didn't. She went to New York, and
Well, and she also, had the beach house
yeah,
and spent a lot of her time over there.
yeah, and that's with her
Yeah.
husband.
Yeah.
Because he worked out of St. Augustine.
Yeah,
so he was
at
a
one point, they lived up in the penthouse, I guess,
Yeah.
of what's now the Ripley Museum, believe it or not, museum.
He described himself as a hotelier.
Okay.
He was a
And he
hotelier.
was.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was very successful. Very
Yeah.
successful in what he was
Yeah.
doing.
So, well, I guess we're all indebted to you for seeing that the house got saved. And it is truly a gift to everyone.
Well, you're awfully kind, sir. I'm indebted to you because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you and your extraordinary advice how to get through law school. And today I'm still practicing law, and I'm 57 years now practicing law. And the trouble is, Roy, I still have to practice. I can't get it right. I keep practicing. And also, wasn't I privileged to have this opportunity to do this at the University of Florida? I mean, Steve O'Connell making me the dean. I mean, that was just such a great opportunity. And this was a great opportunity for me to do this historic preservation, because that was my first historic preservation project. And as you know, I've been involved in historic preservation.
I do.
Yeah, for 50 years in Nantucket, and here in Fernandina, I've been very involved in restoring our town here. And I do some lecturing every once in a while around the country of how do you restore things. Mm-hmm. Of course, at my age, restoration is very important.
Well, and of course, you're still chairing the Preservation Board Nantucket, and that's another one of the University of Florida's jewels, I would say. The Preservation Institute Nantucket, which is now in its 52nd year?
52, yes,
52.
Sir. Yeah, you and I were co-chair of the 50th anniversary.
I've been talking with Buddy Jacobs, a native of Fernandina Beach, a past president of the University of Florida student body, a law graduate, still active with the university, and I so much appreciate his sharing his stories about how the Rawlings House got restored and opened to the public. So thank you, Buddy.
Well, and Roy, thank you. And again, one thing I've learned in life after all these years is there's so many great things that happen in spite of me. Okay, so I never want the credit for anything that's happened, but I just don't want the blame either.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Okay.